I am a 34-year-old lady doing a full-time stressful job. Though work pays well, I'm not exactly enjoying a luxurious life. It entails a lot of overtime. Though I work hard, when I'm not on the clock, I give my social life and self-care top priority. Conversely, my family seems to view life differently, especially with regard to my younger sister Clara. 29-year. Clara is a single mother raising two under 6. She is continually managing part-time employment and motherhood, and while I respect her for it, she frequently relies mostly on our parents for help. She has lately been urging me also to assume greater responsibility, especially in relation to babysitting. It began gently enough 3 months ago. Since her babysitter canceled last minute, Clara requested whether I might spend an afternoon watching her children. She sounded tense, and since I was free that weekend, I agreed. Though generally it was more exhausting than I had anticipated, her children are sweet. Still, it was only one afternoon, and I reasoned it was a one-time occurrence. The calls suddenly began to arrive more often, though. Often already out on errands, I would ask, "Could you just pop over for an hour?" Or, "I have a meeting. Could you help me out?" At the time, it felt under control, but shortly it started to show trends. My leisure time was quietly turning into her emergency daycare choice. I love my nieces, but I have a life outside of work, and I didn't want my whole weekend taken over by watching children. I therefore decided to establish certain limits. I told Clara that my employment prevented me from being at her disposal at will. She seemed to grasp at least initially, but the calls didn't actually stop. At a family celebration of my cousin's birthday, things became rather hot. Everyone was there, and tonight should have been laid back. But during dinner, Clara began discussing her calendar and how challenging it was to locate dependable childcare. She was searching for sympathy, and shortly she brought up how I had told her I couldn't always be helpful. She didn't specifically call me out, but the suggestion hung about like smoke. She spoke on about how family should always be there, and how some people fail to appreciate the strain lone parents experience. My parents added in unison, nodding. They even advised that since I had no children of my own, it was my obligation to step forward. My face began to burn. Though I attempted to remain cool, I had to ground myself. I reminded everyone that, although they don't involve kids, I have obligations. I said that my weekends are usually the only time I have to relax, and that my employment does not let for sudden schedule adjustments. But my parents behaved as though my motives of little importance. They kept stressing this family support concept, according to which families should constantly assist one another, even if it meant making sacrifices. The evening drew to a close angrily. A few days later, Clara contacted wondering whether I might watch her children for a whole Saturday. This time, I turned down it. I had plans, and honestly, I was bored with changing my life to suit her. She didn't take it well, suggesting that because I had the time and wasn't utilizing it for anything important, I should help. The guilt trip then truly started. Encouraging me to think twice, my parents phoned. They claimed family should be there for one another, and Clara was struggling. They said I was overreacting when I informed them I had been helping as much as I could. I object to being a free, on-call babysitter. I registered for nothing like that. I'm glad to assist occasionally, but I can't allow Clara's requirements define my existence. Still, the familial strain grew steadily. They seemed to believe I had unlimited time to spend with them since I'm unmarried and child-free. They saw not that my life is full too, but rather in a different form. Angry and feeling entirely let down, I went to Reddit. I could need an outside viewpoint. I wanted to know whether I was incorrect in refusing to let Clara, and now my parents, control how I spent my time, and in defining limits. After reading through the responses from total strangers who acknowledged my emotions, I at last found some release. Although my Reddit post was much needed, things at home were ready to blow out. That began with the family group chat. My phone filled up with texts from cousins, aunts, and uncles, all chiming in with their opinions. Clara started slinging terms like betrayal and abandonment about my refusal to babysit. A mother of 3, one cousin added with the traditional family's family line. An aunt added how frustrating it was to watch family members not contributing. They missed the irony in never offering to watch themselves. Then Clara raised the pressure, mentioning her financial difficulties and suggesting I owe her support since I was better situated. The family talk descended into a chorus of, "Come on, you're doing well. It's just a little babysitting," and "Think about what she's dealing with every day." They depicted me as some merciless monster hoarding time and money, while poor Clara suffered. Then there came a fresh turn. Clara said her ex gave little financial assistance and was not truly in the picture. I found this to be news. She had always made it seem as though he was simply flaky, not involved. As it happens, he was almost a ghost. At last I answered, stating I knew she was going through a difficult period, but I had to give my personal life top priority as well as my demanding work. But it did nothing except exacerbate problems. When my folks phoned, I felt as though I were under interrogation. While my dad's quiet said volumes, my mom suggested I should rethink just to keep the peace. I tried to explain to them that we should consider the bigger picture and how it was our family's responsibility to be there. They waved it off. Apparently, family values meant free childcare without questions asked. Then Clara mentioned all the times she had ostensibly gone out of her way for me, as if her hardships granted her free pass for my weekends. Desperate, I proposed she pay me a nominal fee to cover my time since daycare is not free. I felt the guilt closing around me. She laughed, calling me callous and declaring no real sister would demand money. My parents started lecturing me about how I had lost sight of family values, working non-stop. I felt shocked. From my vantage point, they showed no attention. I had tiredness. It was like talking to a wall. I tried to set limits, explained myself, even made a compromise, but it seemed like nothing. That evening, I grumbled to a close buddy. Her action by my family startled her, so she urged me to stick to my values. Back home, I found strength reading over the encouraging remarks on my Reddit post. I choose to submit an update outlining the family chat blow-up, Clara's charges, and my parents' response. The comments poured in, advising me to be strong and defend my limits. Not feeling so alone for the first time in weeks. Still, the saga was far from finished. A pal messaged me to check Facebook early next morning. Clara had gone on a protracted emotional tirade about how some family members, who were fully competent, had refused to assist her. From aunts and cousins, comments of sympathy flowed in. Then things got worse. She labeled me in her next post. I never thought my own sister would turn her back on me in my time of need. It was out there for everyone to see: friends, extended family, former classmates. The effects came quickly. Relatives began messaging me inquisitive about what was happening. A few were accusatory, others perplexed. One of colleagues, who also knew the family acquaintance, reported seeing the post. I felt violated. I exploded. Though I knew a public confrontation would only aggravate things, I wanted to face Clara. My folks called before I could even approach her. They set up a meeting wanting to resolve the family tension. I knew what was ahead, another ambush whereby my limitations would be called selfish. The conference absolutely matched my expectations. My parents taught me about family unity and the need of me maintaining peace. Once more, they highlighted Clara's challenges and presented her as the one making all the sacrifices. They brushed off every time I sought to clarify my obligations. Playing her part, Clara looked dissatisfied and wounded. I set my limits once more, saying that although I would be ready to assist sometimes, I could not reorganize my life around hers. My parents indicated they were let down by me and suggested I was putting money above family. The dialogue came to a standstill. Not long later, I ran across a family friend who also happens to be a lawyer. When I brought up the matter and Clara's Facebook postings, he cautioned me that should things get out of hand, I might have legal justification for defending myself. Somehow, Clara learned about this and made it into another public show accusing me of threatening her with a lawyer. Constant conflict and criticism were draining one. I was having mental health problems. I became caught, weary. I returned to Reddit looking for guidance. I told all that had happened. The answers were too plentiful. People urged me to take care of myself after they related their own stories of familial expectations. Some even advised legal action should public humiliation not stop. Although seeing those remarks helped, I realized this was far from done. The doorbell went off one peaceful Saturday morning. It was Clara, dragging 2 children after her. She claimed she couldn't locate anyone else to watch them without a word of explanation. She appeared disorganized, carrying their baggage. She went before I could respond. She had dropped them on me and vanished exactly like that. I got enraged. This was blatantly disrespecting my limits, not stepping up. I called a friend to assist as I worked out what to do. When Clara got back, behaving as like nothing was wrong, I approached her. I informed her dropping her children off without notice was inappropriate. She dismissed it, declaring she had no other choice. "If you do this again," I warned, "I'll have no choice but to call the police." It was the reality of the matter, not a threat. She had to pay for not honoring my limits. She rushed off, murmuring about me overreacting. The family grapevine was whirling the next day. Furious, my parents said that threatening Clara was overreaction. They described me as unsteady and unsisterly. Nobody appeared to give a damn about her crossing a line by leaving her children on my front porch. Next arrived the ultimatum. Clara messaged me stating either, "Consider us estranged," or "I accept to aid whenever she wants it." All or nothing is how it was. Family, in her view, meant relentless, unconditional support, even at the price of my own needs. I left. I asked my close pals, who reassured me I wasn't insane or self-serving. Given the anxiety this was generating, one even urged me to investigate treatment. Though I had never given it much thought, suddenly it sounded like a wonderful idea. Suddenly, I heard from a cousin who had seen the family's response and the online controversy. She admitted that in the past, she had also felt under pressure from Clara, but she had kept quiet to prevent confrontation. Hearing this somehow calmed me down. I wasn't alone myself. Just in case Clara sought to drop off her children once more, I resolved to investigate my rights. I spoke with a friend of a family lawyer who verified that, particularly if it happened often, leaving children with someone unannounced may be seen as abandonment. He reassured me I had rights to defend myself. There was a great emotional cost. I was depressed and felt isolated. It seemed like talking to a stone wall, no matter how hard I attempted to reason with my family. They were gathering around Clara, and I was the villain for imposing sensible limits. I changed my Reddit post to go over everything: the ultimatum, the unannounced drop-off, the family reaction. I sought guidance on handling family members who would not accept limitations. The answer was really strong, reminding me that it was acceptable to put my own well-being first, even if it meant avoiding contact. Others urged me to remain firm. Reading those remarks gave me strength. I realized I had to decide. I would have to go no contact if my parents or Clara couldn't accept my limits. Though I couldn't keep compromising my mental health, I wanted not to lose my family. That was the last straw. Though it meant severing relationships, I was determined to defend myself. I was due a life free from drama and control. I avoided contacting Clara, and the family conversation made it abundantly evident that I would not be her on-call babysitter going forward. I told my folks I needed room. They did not take it well, very predictably. They said I was immature and had abandoned family values, saying Clara needed me now more than ever. My mother begged with me, saying I was separating the family. They sought to guilt me. Still, this time I was firm. The family split more as the days went by. Saying they understood, some relatives contacted out personally to provide encouragement. Some supported Clara. Still, life began to seem simpler. I could concentrate on myself and my profession, free from the ongoing family expectations. My health improved, my finances were strong, and my performance at work shot forward. Guilt trips no longer seemed to hold me captive. Clara kept sharing on social media flimsy, passionate notes on family betrayal. To avoid the turmoil, I blocked her and my parents totally. Therapy turned into a lifeline as I worked with my guilt and the mixed feelings connected to my family. My therapist helped me realize that it was acceptable to put my own life first, and that Clara's problems were not under my control. I started to relax with my choice gradually. I rediscovered pastimes and pastimes. I felt free to concentrate on my own happiness without the drama of family life. Navigating family issues no longer dominated my days. Regarding Clara, I got myself ready legally just in case. One evening, a cousin messaged me. Having seen the online turmoil, she wanted to hear from me. I answered everything. She admitted she battled with herself, so my surprise was her appreciation of my bravery to establish limits. Hearing that made me less alone. Although it had been challenging to set limits and the fallout with my family hurt, it also gave me freedom. Their expectations no longer brought me down. One last time, I changed my Reddit post and thanked everyone for their suggestions. I recounted how my mental health had improved and how avoiding interaction had helped me. The answers were deluging, with many relating similar tales of confronting poisonous family members. Every day that went by made me more sure of my choice. I felt no more like a villain. I felt like someone at last realizing her value. And free from the weight of my family's expectations, I felt really happy with the life I was creating. First in a long time. A SMS message showed up out of nowhere a few months after peace had descended. From Clara came it. She claimed she missed having me in her life. She wanted things right, and she felt we could move past the past. It was the last thing I expected, and I started to doubt. I discussed it with my therapist, who cautioned me to go gently. She advised defining terms for any reconciliation that would respect my limits and enable me to evaluate Clara's genuineness. I agreed to see Clara, but I made it plain that it would just be the two of us. No parents, no extended family. We got together at a small cafe. Clara appeared strained but focused. She apologized first, but it felt flat and practiced. She said she might have gone too far with the family rumors and social media posts, but she rapidly turned to how challenging life had been without the family support she had depended on. She spoke more, and it became abundantly evident that this was about restoring the previous pattern rather than about reconciliation. I cut in to tell her that I was there to talk about our relationship, not to be her backup babysitter. I underlined that my response on consistent babysitting had not altered, even though I loved her and the children. Clara changed her tone from regretful to defensive. Her irritation mounted as the talk went on. She charged me with forgetting what family is meant to mean and of being overly preoccupied with my own life. I remained cool, reassuring her that establishing limits didn't imply I didn't care, that I had to take care of myself as well. Then our parents entered the cafe as I was reaffirming my position. I should have realized it was too wonderful to be real. They had to have been close, waiting for the right occasion. My dad sat opposite from me, looking poised to arbitrate, while my mom sat next to Clara, declaring it time to let go of previous problems and come back together. They started into calls for family unity. They made it sound so straightforward, as like none of this had really affected me. I reiterated that I was willing to mend connections, but I wouldn't sacrifice my health in doing so. The answer came out somewhat predictable. My mother turned to Clara with a sigh, then looked at me saying, "This isn't the daughter we raised." She wondered how I could refuse to aid my sister, phrasing it as if I had abandoned all family values. The ultimatum then was either I start helping Clara whenever she needs it, or I accept I might lose contact with her permanently. I was ready, even if they tried to corner me. I told them I loved them, but I wouldn't let my limits be compromised in order to keep a relationship that turned aside my needs. I made it plain that I was ready to walk away if the only way I could have them in my life was to submit. There was silence across the table. My parents looked at one another, clearly annoyed. Clara seemed haughty, as though she expected I might give in under pressure. Still, I stood my ground. At last, my mother got to her feet, shaking her head and declaring she no longer knew me. My dad said, "I'm making a big mistake." Disappointed that things hadn't gone her way, they left, Clara lagging behind. I was emotionally spent when I arrived home. Friends dropped by to see how I was doing, and I went over everything. They reassured me I had acted ethically. I felt not as though I had lost this moment. I felt as though I had at last advocated for myself. On Reddit, I put a last update including the whole trip. I gave everyone thanks for their direction and help. People responded overwhelmingly, validating me and expressing pride in my ability to be steadfast. My relatives did not get in touch in the next weeks. I accepted the silence as evidence that, for now, we had all gone our different directions. I kept seeing therapists and concentrated on reconstructing my life, free from the continual pressure from family responsibilities. Every day seemed lighter, and I discovered who I was outside of the family dynamics consuming so much of my vitality. A few cousins, including the cousin who had praised my bravery, sent encouraging notes. Looking back on everything, I saw how much stronger I would have grown. Defying expectations had been freeing. I was at last at peace with the limits I had established, even if I still hoped one day things may change. Guilt or commitment no longer weighted me down. I felt actually free for the first time in a very long period. Story 2. Known by most as Anna, I am a 50-year-old mother of 4. Elena, my younger daughter, is a lovely 24-year-old, but she also reminds us of a horrific event all the time. Elena is the result of someone I used to believe to be a close friend attacking me. Dealing with the fallout from that occurrence drove me plunging into a severe depression, made worse by the knowledge I was pregnant. Actually, without my husband David, I might not be here today. For me, he was like rock. He exhorted me to keep on and not let this ruin me. He let me decide whether to raise the child among our other children or offer her for adoption. Giving her up seemed unfathomable, but the idea of rearing her, a continual reminder of what happened, terrible. David stood up in ways I cannot even put words to. In those early years particularly, he had the main responsibility for looking after Elena. Still, it was challenging for all. Our other children are tall, blue-eyed, light-haired, pale-skinned members of your normal, insert ethnicity here, e.g. Irish family. Elena, though, followed her biological father. She has olive skin and thin dark hair. People would say things implying I had betrayed David and gossip about my character. It felt intolerable. Elena's likeness to her father was so great when she was small that simply glancing at her would trigger those terrible memories. I withdrew myself to get through. David knew and assumed even more responsibility. Though I sometimes have episodes, particularly when she cuts her hair short or dresses boyish, my mental state has become better over the years. Elena got closer to David as I was emotionally absent for much of her upbringing. Trying to make up for the affection she wasn't getting from me, he devoted himself especially to her, maybe more than to our other children. About her father, we never spoke the truth to her. David wanted to shield her from feeling like she was any different. I couldn't stand to go back over it. Years ago, we informed her, I had split up with her father, John, for unrelated reasons. Elena got back in touch with John via some distant relative about 2 years ago. She insisted on staying in touch even though I banned it. Saying he had something crucial to tell me, she even urged me to visit him. I said no. She seemed to embrace it at the time, but then her wedding preparations brought things to a head. David escorting her down the aisle was always our ideal, but a recent crash left him with limited movement. At that point, Elena advised John to walk her down the aisle instead. I was devastated as David was, To the man who reared her and loved her totally, it felt like such a slap in the face. She was adamant, even as I tried to convey how I felt and how nasty this was. Things started to get hot, and I have to admit I lost calm. Given she didn't know the complete facts, I informed her she had no right to make this decision. I quickly felt bad about saying it. Given her total darkness, how could I hold her accountable? I can see her wanting her father at her wedding, but the pain connected with him makes being close to him intolerable. Simply said, I cannot see any escape from this. I have to tell you more about my past to help you to appreciate my strong reaction. I was childhood friend of John. Our families literally lived together in a little town where we grew up. John especially agreed that they dreamed of us ending up together. I never saw him that way, though. I ran across David in college, and we were soon married. I did not entirely cut John out of my life even then. Years of friendship were difficult to let go from. Everything was good until one day John asked me to have a drink. That is when it took place. He harassed me. It was made worse by nobody believing me. They backed John, who said it was consensual. I was alone and totally betrayed. Leaving that place seemed like the only choice, beginning fresh with David and the children. Terrified of being judged and re-traumatized, I even turned down therapy. But lately, I chose to stop running based on suggestions from several individuals. I choose to be honest with Elena. I beckoned her over and began by apologies for my outburst over the wedding. Bless her heart, Elena questioned me. Why I disliked John so strongly. I so shared everything with her. She was shocked, as was to be anticipated. She found it unbelievable. I handed her a copy of the court papers from the case I had filed against him all those years ago to demonstrate I wasn't fabricating. She battled the impossibility of it all and her wish to trust me. I agreed when she wanted time to face John. She departed and returned hours later looking upset, but also contrite. She claimed to have spoken to John and, well, she thought me. We wept and held each other. We had hours of conversation. It was the first time, like a mother and daughter ought, I really felt close to her. She promised me she had a surprise for me before we left, something meant to make me feel better. I visited this surprising site yesterday. She invited me to meet her in a little eatery. Elena showed me to the patio when I got there, and John was there as well. Elena said he wanted to apologize. Still, just seeing his face made me whirl. Turning to go, he grabbed my arm and tried to stop me. It was like a floodgate opened. All the memories I had stifled surged back. My panic episode was full-fledged. I fell, and John tried to get me back up, which just made things worse. Tears running down my cheeks, I somehow found my car. Since I was not unfit to drive, I called my son to come get me. Elena called, enraged the next day. She claimed I had wrecked everything. I attempted to convey how traumatic that was for me, how she had put me in that position even knowing about the assault. Given he will be at the wedding, she said she wanted me to get used to seeing him. I told her I couldn't be around him, even though I valued her choice to be with him. This just made her more irate. She charged me with spoiling the most significant day of her life and of undermining her happiness. I hung up realizing there was no logic with her. David exploded when I informed him. Should I decide to miss the wedding, he was ready to support me. I knew, though, what that would imply. Elena would be shunned, subjected to gossip from our relatives and friends and criticism. I found myself imprisoned. That has been some time ago. At last David can stroll using a cane. He's undergoing physical therapy and gradually returning to his former self. I have also begun treatment and found great benefit from it. I wish I had started sooner. My therapist urged me to let the other kids know about the attack, while my other two, who were just 3 at the time, knew nothing. My eldest kid, who was around 6, had some faint memories. I asked them over for supper 2 weeks ago and shared everything with them. They were first quiet, which made me considerably more anxious. My daughter broke down in tears then. She was startled and devastated. Though largely at Elena and John, My sons were upset with me for keeping it a secret for so long. David walked them out of the room, leaving my daughter to wither with tears. Later on, they returned, apologized for their sudden departure, and then left once more. My kids stayed with me into early morning hours. A few days later, I was browsing Facebook when I came onto a post from my daughter accusing Elena of betraying me by getting back in touch with her assailant and ignoring David, the guy raising her. My boys have posted similar things. Online reputation of Elena was under damage. Everyone we knew began sending messages to me. Not able to handle it, I deleted the program. I urged my kids to remove their posts, as I hated that my personal life was being broadcast like this. They told me they already had, but I had no means to verify. Elena had quick and severe ramifications. Her fiancé called off the engagement. He and his mother even came to my house to apologize and show their sympathies. They claimed they would not let someone disrespecting her parents into their family. The flood of support stunned me. People reacting this way never was something I expected, but I also started to feel guilty. I never wanted the wedding of Elena called off. Still, she brought this circumstances about. Elena naturally attributed everything to me. She charged me with destroying her life and alienating everyone from her. I never wanted her to go through the suffering and solitude I went through years ago. My therapist reassured me I had no responsibility. Elena was bearing the results of her own decisions. I was the victim. I still worried about her, though. Once I tried to check in via phone, but I hung up when I heard John's voice on the other end. Knowing I'm not to fault, I still feel terrible about what Elena is going through. Though David and my other kids urge me to concentrate on my own recovery, I find myself thinking about her nonstop. I worry for her safety working with John. This whole process has made clear how prior trauma may contaminate our present relationships and possibly our whole existence. It has also demonstrated, nevertheless, the value of support, honest communication, and empathy that provides the power for our healing and forward motion. Even the toughest hurts can be healed with love and understanding.